Namaskaram. Welcome to Mahabharatam Vee Raa's channel.
Hello everyone, welcome to Kumbakonam Mahabharatam M.V. Ramanujacharya's YouTube channel. Manulur Veeravalli Ramanujacharya was the first person to get the longest epic poem in the world, Mahabharata, translated from Sanskrit into Tamil. He did this work between 1907 to 1932, over 25 long years, and he was awarded the honorific title Maha Maho Upadhyaya by the then Governor General and Viceroy of India, Lord Linlithgow, in 1936. I am Vijay Anand Ramanujam, the great grandson of Manalur Veeravalli Ramanujacharya. The direct descendants, the family members, our family of M.V. Ramanujacharya, started a YouTube channel about a month ago to promote and disseminate information about the life and works of M.V. Ramanujacharya. Today, in our channel, we are pleased to interview one of the leading luminaries, Professor A.R.Venkatachalapathy, in our channel, and I'll be having a conversation with Professor A.R.Venkatachalapathy in a few minutes from now. Born in 1967, Professor Venkatachalapathy had his sights firmly on a banking career, and to this effect, he pursued a degree in BCom in the University of Madras. Little did he know that destiny had something else in store for him. Professor Venkatachalapathy, while doing some research on Vauvusi's letters, happened to visit the state government's archives. Walking down the dusty corridors of the government archives, he was bitten by the bug of history, or rather smitten. To use his own words, Professor Venkatachalapathy was seduced by Clio. His love affair with history continued during his times at the Maraimalai Adigalar Library, where he was exposed to some rich and rare books in Tamil literature. Professor Venkatachalapathy uses a metaphor of a starving cow in the midst of millet fields being exposed to such rich and diverse literature. That enabled him to pursue a career in history. He completed his MA in history, and also he got a position in the prestigious Center for Historical Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he finished his PhD. His subject matter expertise was the social and cultural history of colonial Tamil Nadu. Professor Venkatachalapathy today is a professor at Madras Institute of Development Studies. A man of diverse interests, he dons various hats effortlessly. He is an accomplished historian, he is a translator, he is a speaker at various conferences and participant in literary festivals such as the Hindu Lit Fest and so on. He is a columnist, having written for several magazines and weeklies and periodicals such as the Economic and Political Weekly, the Hindu, Frontline, Kala Chuvadu, Dinamalar, and so on. He is also a visiting professor and fellow at some of the leading Indian and international universities. To name a few, the University of Cambridge, the University of Chicago, and a few more. Last but not the least, Professor Venkatachalapathy is an accomplished writer, having written more than 50 books in both English and Tamil. Some of his books include In Those Days There Was No Coffee, Who Owns the Song, The Battle for Subramania Bharati's Copyrights. His latest book that is out on the shelf is Swadeshi Steam, a book on Vauvusi, India's first person to start a shipping company between India and Sri Lanka, challenging the might of the mighty colonial British maritime empire. This book is out in the bookstores and also available on Amazon. Those interested may go and grab a copy. Welcome, Dr. Venkatachalapathy. It's such a pleasure to have you on our show. And on behalf of the family, we also thank you and express our gratitude for the research that you have carried out about our great grandfather over the last 30 years. Happy to have you, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Vijay Anand. It's a pleasure to be in touch with the family of the illustrious scholar, editor, and publisher M.V. Ramanujacharya.
In your long and illustrious career, you've published and researched and published articles and books on numerous personalities like Vauvusi, Subramania Bharati, Uvesa, Pudumai Pittan, and so on. Just curious to know, where was the first time your attention sort of turned towards Manalur Veeravalli Ramanujacharya?
Though I had heard about his name for a long time, it was in 1991 when I was doing my PhD research. I looked at the volumes of A.R.Venkatachalapathy, and in the 1940 volume for 1940, an obituary notice of M.V. Ramanujacharya had been published, which gave an account of his great publication, the Tamil translation of Mahabharata. It also referred to the editorial preface that he had written for the second part of Vanaparvam. So as soon as I saw it, I immediately rushed to the Dr. U.V. Swaminathan library and asked for the copy of Vanaparvam, and I read the introduction. As you know, it is a long introduction, 55-page introduction. It was a stunning introduction. I was really impressed and astonished by the scale and magnitude of his achievement. So I intended to do more research on him, and I wanted to include his achievement in my thesis, which was on the social history of Tamil publishing. So then I went to the Tamil Nadu archives, because Ramanujacharya was trying to seek the patronage of the colonial state. He had written a number of appeals to them. So in these appeals requesting for patronage, he gave elaborate details about how he started the project, what it cost him, what were the expenses involved. So that was a great source of information. So I used that information. Then at the Swaminathan library, because Ramanujacharya was a student, you could say that he was a disciple of Swaminathan. The correspondence of Swaminathan is there. So I read the letters that he had written to him, and there are also many references to Ramanujacharya in the correspondence. So I collected all this material. Then about his life itself, there is a volume called Who's Who in Madras, published in 1935, I think, by a press in Cochin. In those days, Who's Who were compiled based on information that the persons themselves gave. So there is a entry on M.V. Ramanujacharya which gives in brief details about his life. So this is what I actually used to write about him, first in a brief manner in English in the thesis, which was written in 1994 and submitted in 1995. Then later in 2006, I expanded it into a longer piece in Tamil and published it in Kalachod. Meanwhile, I found further information when I was looking at the old Hindu back volumes in the Cambridge University Library. So in 1914, Ramanujacharya had published an appeal in the Hindu asking for support for his project. So in that appeal also there was some information. But the most interesting information I got was from the Swadeshamitran weekly edition of 1935. There was a long article about M.V. Ramanujacharya written by Sundara Raghavan. The irony of it is that it was published in a series on South Indian celebrities. They had been compiled and published by Alliance publishers in 2007. But this particular piece was missing. So I found that this one is a very detailed piece which talks a lot about his early life, how he got interested in the things that he got interested in, how he went to Kasi, how he studied Sanskrit and Tamil, and what were all the various jobs that he held, what was his family background. So all this information is there. So in 2016, when I published this book called Ash Adichuvatil, Arinyargal Aalumaygal, I expanded this article and then I published that article. I also want to add something about the photograph. So the only photograph that I originally saw was published in A.R.Venkatachalapathy. So in those days I had no money. So I photocopied that article with that photograph. So in those days, if you got a good Xerox, it would cost 1 rupee. But if you got it Xeroxed in some local place with a very bad machine using kerosene, you would get it for 40 paisa. So to save 60 paisa, I photocopied that, and that was the picture that I first used in the Kalachodu article. Later, when I got the new edition published from Urapakam, they had a better picture, but that was a color picture, but it had been heavily touched up. So until you located the nice picture that was taken in 1911, you did not have even a good picture of this great servant.
Thank you. Talking about money, you also written a book, a very intriguing book called The Province of the Book, and scholars, scribes and scribblers of colonial Tamil Nadu. In that you trace the history of Tamil publishing in print form. I was really astounded to see that the first ever print in any Indian language was in Tamil in 1577, which you have mentioned in your book. In that book, you take the case studies of M.V. Ramanujacharya and Subramanya Bharati and say that in the early 20th century, they were caught in a bind in terms of continuing to seek the patronage for their book publishing and resorting to market determined forces of the burgeoning middle class that was there in terms of seeking recourse for their book sales. You speak about a transition happening during this phase, and also these people facing a lot of traumatic experiences and a lot of dilemmas that they face. Perhaps could you elaborate on the dilemmas that they face and the changing landscape of Tamil publishing industry from the 19th century to 20th century? And also, maybe speaking of money and finance, maybe if you could just add and share with the viewers about the financial difficulties and obstacles that Ramanujacharya faced.
See, up to the late 19th century, publishing was done mostly through patronage because there was no reading public. Very few educated people, very few people were buying books, and books were expensive. So books were published with the help of patronage of zamindars, chieftains, rich men, traders. But by the beginning of the 20th century, this patronage had become very weak. But at the same time, there was no market. The reading public had not emerged. So it was at this time that both Subramanya Bharati, M.V. Ramanujacharya and others were working. So they could not get patronage. See, Ramanujacharya tried his best, but the patronage that he got was very limited. Professor K. Sundararamayar gave him 200 rupees. Swaminathan gave him 50 rupees. Couple of other people gave him a few 100 rupees. But the project itself cost 1.5 lakhs over 25 years. So at the same time, there were not enough readers. So he used the method called subscription. That is, people could subscribe to this project because this project, as you will recall, was published in 45 installments. The technical term for it is called
Sanjigai.
Sanjigai. In English, it is called fascicule. So what would happen is readers who are interested would subscribe, and then every installment or fascicule that was published, it would be sent to them through VPP, value payable post, and then they would send the money. When he started the project in 1908, he had 800 subscribers. By the time he finished the project in 1932, the number had come to 250. So he used his own money. He used his wife, who was a very uncomplaining woman. So Ramanujacharya says that his wife never asked him what he was doing. She gave her jewels. She also gave the property that she got from her natal family. So he used all this money. And the other complications with the project was that because this translation was published in installments, some parts would get sold out earlier than others. So if you wanted to sell them, you had to reprint them. So there was no photo offset in those days. So every time to reprint, you have to use the letterpress to recompose, proofread, fine paper, print it, and then send it. So it is to put it mildly, it is a nightmare. So the one side is the material difficulties, the other side is the intellectual difficulties. First, what is the text you have to follow? When he started the project, he didn't have idea about it. But only after the first translations were done, he had to take a decision whether to use the northern recension or the southern recension. After careful analysis, he realized that, as always, as a Tendalai Iyengar, very clearly, the south is always superior. The graceful benevolence of Lord Vishnu, his benevolent face is turned towards the south. So south is always superior. So he decided to use the southern recension, which is a better text. So he had to find various translators to translate. Then they had to be rechecked. Then they had to be copied by hand. So remember, there were no photocopying machines. There were no scanning machines. So every time it had to be copied. So he hired amanuenses, he hired clerks, scribes to make copies. And then they had to be printed, they had to be proofread. So it is both a intellectual challenge and also a material challenge. Both of it he balanced, and he against the greatest odds. As you know, Tamil society is not a society which actually encourages big projects. Usually they will discourage people who do big things. So he met with the same kind of discouragement. Everybody would say, yes, Ramanujacharya, this is a great project, but this is too big. Can you do it? Can we do it? So he refused to be disheartened. He soldiered on. So in fact, once he consulted an astrologer. The astrologer didn't give very positive news. So what he did is he quietly put it away in an envelope, sealed it with lac, and said this should be opened only after the project is finished. So he reopened it after the project was finished, which actually said that this project would never be complete. But of course, we know that the project achieved fruition after 24 years.
One thing, Sri Venkatachalapathy, which I wanted to ask is there's so many people, so many Mahabharatam versions that have come out before Vee Raa undertook this work, and so many have also written after Vee Raa. What was unique about Vee Raa's Mahabharatam?
Okay. So, as far as the Ramayana goes, in Tamil, Kamban translated the Ramayana, and through his translation, it is one of the greatest epics written in any language, and it was strongly rooted in the devotional tradition of India, the Bhakti tradition, which originated in Tamil. So Tamil is the language, and South India is the place of the birth of the Bhakti movement, which transforms and democratizes the Hindu religion. It is the one which says that nothing is more important than the personal relationship of the soul with God. And you achieve that by complete devotion and surrender. You don't have to do anything else. This is a great message that originates from the south. So the Alvars write their poetry, and Kamban is steeped in Alvar poetry, and he creates the Kambarama. As far as the Mahabharata goes, it is less a religious text than a complex text about the intricacies of human life and the values of human life. So if you look at it, people say that Mahabharata is the story of the clash between dharma and adharma. Yes, it is. But the irony is that dharma has to win through not very dharmic methods, and it is full of characters, and each character has a motivation, each character has a backstory, and for every action of the character there is an explanation for it, and those explanations are valid in themselves. So even the worst villain in that story has a logic for why he acts like that. They are not evil incarnate. Or on this side, these are not the incarnations of virtue. It's not like Ramayana, where Ramabiran, Raman is he's an avatar, right? He's not the Lord has decided to come to this earth as a human being. So everybody is very clear that he is the Kalyana Raman with all the attributes of God. But Mahabharata is about ordinary people. So they do lots of things. So this is a very also, I hesitate to use that term. You can say that it is a baggy monster. It is a huge text. The narrative is not linear. There are so many branch stories, what they call Uvakyanam, Kilaikadaigal, branch stories. So it is a very complex story. So no one person can actually translate or rewrite it in any language. So in Tamil there have been many Mahabharatas. Many of them have been lost. See, there is somebody called Bharadam Padiya Perindevanar. We have not got any stanza from that. Villiputtura wrote it. Villiputtura Alvar, that is why it's called Villiputtura Alvar. And we have Nallapillai Bharadam. We have many Ramayana, Mahabharatam. But none of these Mahabharatams is a complete translation because it is more than 100,000 slokas. So nobody attempted it. Only in the 19th century, when the Western Orientalists came, first what was an oral tradition and had been written down in palm leaf manuscripts came into print only after the British Orientalists came. So only after that translations were attempted. So the English translation was done by Pratap Chandra Rai. The edition was prepared by Pratap Chandra. I'm sorry, it's not translation, it is an edition which he does. Then later, under the great scholar of Maharashtra, V.S. Suktankar, under the aegis of Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, they compile and compare various versions of the Mahabharata and produce the edition. So as far as Tamil goes, Ramanujacharya decided that because this is a very important text and it should be known in full, not in parts. So he set about doing it, and that is his achievement. So to this day, as far as I know, nobody has matched this achievement of a complete translation in Tamil of the Mahabharatam. I don't know about other languages. People have to do some research on it.
So you mentioned about Ramanujacharya employing some eminent scholars of those times who were proficient in Sanskrit and Tamil to engage with this work, a team of scholars. So what was Ramanujacharya's role itself? He was not the exact actual translator. So what would you classify him as? Editor-in-chief, author, publisher? What was he?
You would say, in modern terms, you would call him both the editor-in-chief and publisher.
Right.
So, editor-in-chief because he was the one who conceived this project.
The chief architect, you would say. Okay.
He conceives this project.
Right.
He decides how one should go about it.
Right.
He decides which text should be translated, who should translate it, what are the principles to be adopted for translation. And he is the one who ensures that these translations are checked with the original. He is the one who decides how it is to be printed and published. He is the one who raises all the material resources, and he is the one who distributes it. So in modern terms, you would call him editor-in-chief and publisher.
And he was also instrumental in finances of course, paying all the translators. And so.
Publisher means publisher is the one who's responsible for all these things.
Right.
The thing is, the conception is this.
Right.
You have to conceive something, right? When you start, you don't know what it is.
Right. Good. Thank you, sir. Other than that, the stark reality today is that Madalur Veeravalli Ramanujacharya is hardly known in Tamil literary circles. Even Mahabharatam, people feel that, you know, it might be Rajaji or Villiputtura who wrote the complete Mahabharatam. So his name has been largely obscure. So what would you attribute that to?
Uh, Two reasons. One
Right.
is general reason is, our society is not something which is Tamil society, Indian society is not something that values important intellectual work. Usually we celebrate only flashy things. The popularity that Dhoni has uh, is not given to somebody who would produce a dictionary or who does some scholarly work. This is the kind of people we are. So, and then secondly, we as a people are generally ahistorical. We don't, preserve documents, etc. This is the general thing. Apathy, indifference, etc. On the other side, some of the issues behind this is that so much has happened in the last 100 years. Our society has transformed. Uh, when I was growing up, uh, we, our parents, our grandparents, our aunts, uncles, they used to tell us all these stories. Then we also read books. Now, my sense is that generally, the art of storytelling is gone. So the only way to access the old stories, in our times, we also had the cinema. You remember so many films were made, either based on the Mahabharata or on separate stories among it. So there was I still a Karnan or Vee Raa Abhimanyu or something like that. We had, or there would be a film where, like Maya Bazar, where Gadotkajan plays a very important role. So those kind of stories. Then of course we had this time when, in Hindi B.R. Chopra.
You had Doordarshan coming out with Mahabharatam.
But the point is, what we forget is, even though they are the same epics and the same Itihasas, the southern conception of the Mahabharata and Ramayana are different. So you find that, if you want, you can edit this out. See, the South Indian people are not able to, identify themselves with the Ram or Sita of Ramananda Sagar. Because, our understanding of Ram, Sita comes from a different tradition. It's completely different. For us, Andal is more important than. In fact, our tradition is that. What is our tradition? Our tradition is, who is superior, the devotee or God? Tell me, who is superior?
Interesting question.
No, the devotee is superior to God.
Right.
Because devotion is much, much bigger than anything else.
Right.
The God himself cannot overrule devotion. Right? Even though the devotion is to him.
Absolutely.
The surrender is to him, but the devotion is superior. So we know of this story. This comes only in Tamil Nadu, where you remember, Ram asks his brother to, heat water. The water doesn't get heated up. Lakshman does all kinds of tricks, but the water refuses to get boiled. They look into it because there is a frog inside which is chanting the name of Ram.
Right.
So Ram's own brother, who worships him like God, is powerless before the devotion of a frog. So that is
very interesting.
Yeah. That is devotion. So we value devotion. So that is one aspect.
And so many bhakti saints have been there in Shaivism as well as Vaishnavism.
Everywhere devotion. The story of Tinnappan or Kannappan would be inconceivable in North India.
But Mirabai was there.
Mirabai was there, but Mirabai is very different from Andal. Andal is Sudi Kudutta Sudarkudi.
Okay.
I mean, Andal is there's no parallel to Andal.
More on the
Yes,
comparisons
yes,
later.
yes. Let us not
for sure.
get divert. So let me finish this. So
Right.
what happens is Tamil tradition at the same time, even though we produce the Alvars and Kamban, it is a strongly Saivite tradition. And secondly, the Vaishnava tradition is a minority. And it is also a lot of schisms involved within the Sri Vaishnava tradition. And then they have a, what can we say, the technical language that they use is highly Sanskritized. So they use the language called Manipravalam. So what is rubies and corals. So Tamil and Sanskrit are mixed, which only the scholars can understand. So if you are not trained in that language, you will not be able to understand it. It has to be retranslated into Tamil. So this was the tradition. So my favorite example is that of Prativadi Bhayankara Manankaracharya, one of the great scholars of 20th century. But who remembers him? People will know Swaminatha Iyer, people know Avai Durasamy Pillai, but people don't know Prativadi Bhayankara Manankaracharya. One of the primary reasons is that the language that they use, it was a very, you could say a very, very highly sophisticated form of, theological language. So the simplicity of God would be called Saulabhyam. Who would understand what Saulabhyam is now? So every word is a technical term which is also loaded. You cannot just simply, replace it with another word. So they translated it as Saulabhyam is Elivanda Tanmai. So only theologians can translate this. So I think Ramanujacharya's world, his intellectual circle was probably limited to this small community of Vaishnavite scholars, and that perhaps is one of the reasons why he's forgotten.
Sure. So going forward, what would you suggest for the society at large for preserving Ramanujacharya's works and promoting his legacy, or anything can be done as an improvement or as a continuation of where he left off?
Okay. Two things I would suggest. One is to do more research on him and write a extended monograph or a book on how we did it. I have covered some of it, but actually you have to go into the text. You have to see how it has been translated. From what I have seen, from the comparison that we made when my friend Adiman published Panjali Sabadam, we could see that, the fidelity to the original is very, very high. But new research
Could you
has
elaborate
to be done.
on that?
So what we did was, my friend Adiman, he published a new edition of Bharatiyar's Panjali Sabadam. When he published it, we know that Bharatiyar says in his introduction that the story is completely borrowed from the Mahabharata, that he has not added anything to the story. So we thought it is only modesty. But actually, when we compared it with Ramanujacharya's translation, we found that in terms of the content, it is exactly the same.
Right.
What Bharati has done is, he has transformed that into, glittering gold. That is a different matter. The genius of Bharati is there in Panjali Sabadam. But as he himself has said, it is very close to the original.
Right.
And to prove it, we have Ramanujacharya's translation. So this kind of comparison should be done. So research should be done. But for contemporary times, we have to remember that the last more than 100 years, Tamil language has changed. Because Tamil language is a living language, it is spoken by about 80, 90 million people. It is constantly changing. And also in the last 100 years, we have had a pure Tamil movement, Tani Tamil movement. So language has changed. Now if you republish that, yes, it has been republished, very few people will be able to understand that language. So what can be done is, see, a fresh translation of Mahabharata can be done, but I don't know who will be able to do it, who will fund the project, who is going to do it, who has the intellectual capacity to do it. Those are all different things. But one thing can be done. Competent team of scholars can just use this edition, Ramanujacharya's edition, and rewrite it in contemporary Tamil. So you outdated words that people won't understand anymore can be changed.
Sure.
Then long sentences can be broken up. And you can also see that it runs into paragraphs. Paragraphs run into page after page.
Maybe they wanted to stick to the original.
No, but the original is in the form of slokas.
Sure.
Okay. And the other thing is, the thing about Ramayana and Mahabharata is it is not the monopoly of anybody. Everybody has the right to read it, reinterpret it in their own way.
Absolutely.
So, by reinterpreting it in the 21st century, you are not being unfaithful to the.
No, absolutely. No, I take your suggestions
Yes,
fully,
that is
sir. So actually, I've been reading that Mahabharatam by Ramanujacharya. To that extent, I didn't pursue a formal education in Tamil in school, but I learned Tamil outside of school. Having, not learned formally, 80 to 90% of that Tamil, I would say, is fairly understood. But yes, you are right in the sense that there is still those words that stump you now and then. Yeah. And that is where some new efforts and initiatives to improve and build upon that book is very welcome.
Be printed in a nice font,
right.
Well produced. Right. The way it is now produced, it will just turn off the younger people. We have to catch the younger people. And it is also very important that, the very, crass kind of interpretations that are now being produced on TV and cinema, that is also a great loss. These are great human documents. It is not like the Bible or like the Quran or like the Torah. These are all, yes, some people worship them, but these are texts which are the heritage of humanity. So everybody should be able to read it. Some people may worship it, but even if you don't worship it, you should read it, because they tell you, as the world changes, it needs to be rooted in certain values. And stories like Mahabharata help you to understand. It doesn't communicate values. It doesn't actually tell you do this, do that. But it helps you to understand the dilemmas. Your problem about artificial intelligence, you will not get anything directly from Mahabharata. But if you are faced with a moral dilemma, if you are faced with various kinds of value conflicts, that's when you go to these great human texts, not to see it as religious. Religious texts you worship.
Very interesting insight that you brought out. When I was reading one of the Munnurais or prefaces of M.V. Ramanujacharya, one of the leading lawyers of those times had written to him saying that the Mahabharata version of Ramanujacharya, he's brought out a book called Sila Abhiprayangal, where a lot of people have written in praise or critical commentaries about the book. So one of the leading lawyers, I can't remember the name, has mentioned that this edition of Ramanujacharya's Mahabharatam helped him solve with a legal case that he was grappling with. So you hit the nail on the head.
That is the point. So the great thing about these kind of texts is that they are reinterpreted by every generation.
Absolutely.
Every generation reads it anew and learns very different lessons.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic note to end this conversation with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Venkatachalapathy. It was a pleasure meeting you, and thank you for the rich insights and also for your yeoman service in doing research over the last 30 years about a long forgotten man, and you've kept him his flag flying. Yeah. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Dhanyavad for watching our Vee Raa's channel. Please share with your friends and family. Please subscribe to know more about Vee Raa. We value your suggestions at Veeravalli Ramanujacharya family.